Welcome to Real Girl Talk Podcast Radio. Welcome back to Real Girl Talk Podcast Radio. I am your host, Sherry Ricard. I am a medical professional, author, adversity recovery specialist, and co-founder of Silver Lining Wellness Company. I love sharing my faith and bringing you fascinating guests, Friday Fire messages, thinking outside the box, sharing ideas for business, beauty, and lifestyle abundance, and always committed to keeping it real. Now let's level up and let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the show. Thank you guys for joining me today. I just want to start off by saying thank you because I do not take you guys for granted, not for one single moment. I get the most amazing feedback through my Real Girl Talk podcast Instagram inbox, Facebook. You guys leave me beautiful ratings and reviews, and you have no idea what that means to me. So thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you haven't already left a rating and review, please go back to Apple Podcast and leave that because it really does help with the rankings and Real Girl Talk so I can reach more women around the world and give inspiration and just talk real to them about beauty, business, lifestyle. We go over everything. You know, I have a lot of different guests, and today is no exception. I have an amazing guest, Dr. Alexandra Stockwell. She is better known as the Intimacy Doctor. She's an intimate marriage expert who specializes in showing high-achieving couples how to build beautiful, long-lasting, passionate relationships. She is the best-selling author of Uncompromising Intimacy and the host of the Intimate Marriage Podcast. She is going to tell us 6 keys how we can be power couples and lead successful relationships. Hello, Dr. Stockwell. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. I'm really honored to be on your show.
Aw, thank you. And I'm honored to have you because I was telling you that I wanted to have someone that really is knowledgeable and specializes in that marital union and how to grow as a couple. And I've wanted that for a year, and I don't know why we haven't done that or we just kind of get sidetracked with other things. But I'm super excited that you're here because, you know, it's springtime and everybody's happy right now. We're having, you know, we're transitioning to summer, and spring is always beautiful. And what a nice time to talk about couples. You know, we talk about you being someone that shows high achieving couples how to build beautiful, long lasting, passionate relationships. And my question to you right off the bat is, what the heck is a high achieving couple anyway? And we'll just kind of start there.
I love that that's your question. It's actually a profound question and a humble question all mixed in one. I think of high achieving, high performing expressions along those lines. We know how to assign them when it comes to athletes. We also know how to assign that term when it comes to people who, let's say, are entrepreneurs with a very successful business, like let's say a tech startup that then becomes a household name. We think of that person as a high achieving person. And we're used to looking at areas of performance. I mean, performance in quote. I don't mean being in the theater or anything like that, but areas of performance as places where we can be underperformers, high performing, or somewhere in the middle. And that really reflects a vision and a drive and a devotion to approaching, whether it's business or athletic excellence. Those are the examples I've used with real excellence. We don't so often look at our marriages through the same lens, which is understandable for many different reasons. But before I say what some of them are, let me ask you if this resonates with you. Does that clarify what I'm pointing to with high performing?
Definitely. Yeah, it does. It definitely does. Thank you.
There are a number of reasons why that isn't an attitude that is common in marriages, even when people care a great deal about their marriages. One of the things is that when we get married and make a commitment, it of course is very easy to ride on the commitment when it was made
Right.
and not necessarily continue to put attention into the marriage on a regular basis. But if you think of someone like, let's say, Michael Phelps,
Mm-hmm.
he committed to becoming an Olympic athlete, and then he lived that every single day. And that is true for whatever we think of Mark Zuckerberg when he built Facebook. Same
Right.
thing.
Right.
Steve Jobs, like we can think of examples in so many areas. And there is that kind of edgy drive in the examples I've used so far. And that edgy drive, that is not actually what is going to bring satisfaction, passion, collaboration in a marriage. It's a totally different energy
Right.
and different actions, thoughts, and feelings. But there is a need for a maybe not the same, but a comparable mindset, which is what I'm pointing to with high performing, because it just is easy to take our relationships for granted. And then those relationships reflect having been taken for granted.
100%. I agree. And I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there has to be some type of commitment and foundation, and then you build off of that foundation. But to be constantly, to me, I think about an athlete who wakes up in the morning and just does nothing but focus, strive to achieve their highest level, whether they're competing in the Olympics or, professional game or whatever it is. That is what they do on a daily. It's that commitment, that's drive. And do we have that in relationships where you wake up in the morning and you're just like, I am committed to this marriage? I mean, from the very beginning, I think we do start to take our marriages for granted. We take our partners for granted because we expect things from them and we don't always get the things that we want, and vice versa for them. I'm not just speaking how the women should, go around expecting all these things from their men, but men too. I mean, they expect things from their wives that they may get at the beginning, but they don't necessarily get as the relationship goes forward. So I think you do have to have a good foundation to start right there. Some people do get married for the wrong reasons. You have to get married for the right reasons. You have to be committed. We know nobody goes into a marriage going, I'm committed for so long, and then this is going to go south. I mean, you go in, guns a-blazing, right? And it's all happy and honeymoon, and then life happens.
Exactly. And I think one of the root causes of the phenomenon that you're describing, let me just say, like, this wasn't true when European royalty married in order to maintain peace in the different kingdoms, or if we go even further back where, and actually in some countries, it's still the case where the marriage was really a business partnership between two fathers, or the husband and the father-in-law to be. Like, we're just not in that paradigm anymore. And so we really need to create marriages and cultivate our marriages from a different lens. And so in that context, what I want to say that I think is a root cause of this problem for modern day Western marriage is the most common relationship advice that is given is that you have to learn to compromise. Compromise is the name of the game. If you want a great marriage, you have to be good at compromising. But the reality is, if you want a conflict-free, passion-free, bland, supportive companionship, compromise is absolutely the way to go. It will deliver that to you the better you are at compromise. But if you want a dynamic, passionate, chemistry filled, just full of vitality, the kind of relationship where I don't know that you'd wake up every day, oh, I'm so thrilled to be married to you. I've been married 26 years. I'm not delusional about this, but where it's the opposite of taking the marriage for granted, where it's a source of fulfillment and growth and ever deepening connection. For that, I talk about uncompromising intimacy. It's the name of my book, and it's one of the things that I speak most often about. But by uncompromising, I don't mean you always get your own way, you just dominate, bully, and you don't compromise. That's not what I mean. But what I do mean is that where compromise is where you don't express your desires, your thoughts, your feelings, your challenges, so that your spouse is more comfortable. When it comes to building uncompromising intimacy and really fueling the passion, you do learn to express everything that is true inside you. There's no part of you that you leave at the front door. When you come home, you bring all of yourself to the marriage and invite your partner to do the same. And then the two of you from there can decide what you want to do with what you're talking about. But it's a completely different thing for me to desire Thai food and end up going for Italian when I just never say that actually I'd like Thai food because my husband and kids want Italian. So we'll just, again, I'll just do that. I don't even think about it, versus saying, honey, it might even make sense to go to Italian because our children prefer that, but I would love to have Thai food tonight. And maybe we all get takeout and I get Thai and the rest of the family has Italian. And that is a beautiful evening. Maybe we feed the kids and my husband and I go for Thai and he just has a sandwich before and then finds some broth or something that he'll enjoy. Like, there are so many ways to navigate this. And it's not about demanding what you want. It's about being willing to be vulnerable enough to express desires and dissatisfactions in a way that uplift the relationship rather than just function as complaining.
Yeah, because I think what you're describing, the way I'm looking at it, is someone's always doing the settling. They'll settle for less than what they desire, what they want, in order to keep peace and make everyone happy. So this is so describes so many women that are listening right now going, oh yeah, Jesus, that's me, is that they will say, okay, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Well, we'll do that because it's best for the kids. We'll do that because it's best for the marriage. Or I chose to do this or not say this just to keep the peace. Oh, I've heard that many a times.
Or I'm too worn out to even get into it.
Right. I'm too tired. And then what happens is you settle. And then from that settlement builds a resentment.
It builds a resentment, which takes on a life of its own. It creates imperceptible, invisible walls that you cannot get through. The more a woman does this, even if she's not doing this at work, she's clear about what she wants and is an amazing leader or contributor to a team, but specifically at home, the more a woman settles, the less connected she is with her own desires, to the point where she may not even know what they are. I have had conversations with competent women who are successful and everything looks good to somebody else. And in the context of her marriage, she might be 40, she might be 55, she might be 70. I might say, what do you want? Oh, well, he says, and da, 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 da. Okay. And what do you want? Well, the thing is, my daughter-in-law, but what do you want? I've had some really tender, pivotal moments with a woman who realizes she doesn't know. She just knows that she feels dissatisfied because she hasn't been getting what she wants, but she doesn't actually know what that is. So if someone is listening and recognizes themselves, the first place is to start with, what do you actually desire? What do you want? And let me emphasize, that's a very different thing to put attention on that as opposed to what you don't want.
Right.
Although they are related, because when we complain, invariably there's a desire buried within every complaint. So if you're listening and you're not really sure what you want, consider what you complain about and are dissatisfied with, and then look for the desire. So for example, if you're feeling resentful that he never pays attention to you, well, your desire is to have him ask you about your day sometimes.
Yeah, just simple things like, and it changes in, those that have been married for 3 years versus 15 years versus 25 and 35 years. And I know that it probably changes your desires and your wants, and all of that changes as you grow older, because the kids move out of the house and then things change. And then it's just left with you two. We make a joke in our house when my son moved out and I said, I can't believe you're leaving me here with your dad. and so my husband says the same thing to my son. He'll say, I can't believe you left me here with your mother. But I mean, things change. It's because, Carson's not here anymore. So I don't cook certain things that were just for him. We tend to agree on what we're eating. It's not a big deal. I cook less because it's just him and I. And so we order out a lot, or we'll go to dinner. We didn't do that all the time when we had kids in the house because, everybody does have a different opinion on what they want. And Wendell and I just kind of do our thing. It just kind of works. But I know that one of the hard things about marriage, as the marriage grows and you're married for a long time, is people do lose their passion. And then you start having a lot of issues in the marriage, right? Like one person may work a whole lot or stay away from home, or one person may travel. And, you hear people growing apart as their children leave home. Then these couples that were once together, really were a family, starts to grow apart. So how do you, once a child leaves the home, how do you keep that marriage together?
Well, in a way that you probably didn't notice, you've pointed to the answer twice just now, because the key is that people do continue to grow. You talked about growing apart, and each person grows with the passing of time. And what, in my opinion, honestly, an epidemic, I don't want to use that word too casually, but it is so common, is that couples get married with whatever their personality, preferences, interests, wherever they are in life. They get married, and part of the experience of falling in love and being in love includes having this insatiable curiosity, like, oh, where did you get that scar? And what was your favorite vegetable when you were a child?
Yeah.
And, if you could be president, like, what policies would you implement? And what is your favorite book? And what is your favorite Bible verse? Like, we just have so many questions and are filled with curiosity. And then as we become more familiar, we know one another, and that feeling of being in love with that amazing intensity tapers off. There's something beautiful that happens. There's a safety and a companionship when we know what the answer would be when we ask the question.
Yeah.
But generally, we put our attention on other things, and we presume our partner is the way they have been. And what that means is fewer open-ended questions. Sure, there are logistical questions. Are you going to pick the kids up, or should I? Or,
Right.
What color should we paint this room? But I mean an open-ended question that it doesn't have a right answer. It doesn't even have a specific answer, but it's more an opportunity to get to know one another again. That cultivating curiosity, asking open-ended questions, is one of the most essential ways. It's not the only thing, but it's definitely a primary way to keep passion going, because with curiosity, we track our spouse's growth. So often a woman will grow, but it will be something that she shares with her friends, or interest she has without her husband, let's say. And it is essential, in the way that I was talking about with uncompromising intimacy, bring any significant growth into the relationship, so that both of you are aware that it is happening. This can sound like something so simple, so basic, but I often talk about cultivating curiosity. And I remember while I'm talking, I'm thinking, I gave a talk, and there was a woman who, her marriage was good. She actually heard my talk because there was another woman talking, and she came for that talk, but she just was polite and was in the room. And so she heard me speak, and she'd been married for 32 years, just had a good, strong marriage. And based on what I said, she went home that evening and she asked her husband open-ended questions for the first time in as long as she could remember. And they had this incredible conversation with a lot of emotional intimacy. And she was just surprised because she thought they had a good, strong marriage, and they did. With that opening and experience of emotional intimacy, it really paves the way for sensual intimacy and passion. In a long-lasting relationship, you don't really get to have passion and erotic intimacy unless you're really cultivating the emotional intimacy.
Everything that you're saying, I can completely relate to. It's interesting that I actually do that, and Wendell does that. And I never really thought about it. We are constantly talking and feeding off of each other's opinions. We don't always agree on,
which is not necessary.
Right. It's like, fine, we'll agree to disagree. But, I will ask him, what did you think about so-and-so? Or what are you thinking about, what's happening in Florida? Or, I just got back from Disney, which, people refer to as woke Disney. And, he said, did you see anything that looked any different? No, I didn't. It looked completely the same. There was nothing there that I needed to explain to my 6-year-old granddaughter, And so we had this whole conversation about it. And I told him about the trip, and we do. Now, granted, he will tell you the same story many times over. And when he's telling it to somebody, I'm like, my gosh, I've heard this story 1,000 times. But when we're talking to each other, we do ask each other open-ended questions. And I think that's good. I didn't realize that we were really doing that. But I think that's why after 23 years, we continually find things to talk about because we do question each other. And I guess we were doing that. And I didn't even realize that was a good thing.
It's a really good thing. And I'm guessing that it's also why a few times you've referred to it as though it's so obvious that people continue to grow. Because when you're asking questions, you're tracking that growth, day to day in a way that, the ultimate experience with growing apart is that you wake up one day and look at your spouse and you realize you don't know them anymore. Well, that is because, there are many things that can contribute to that. But if you are making it a regular thing to ask open-ended questions, it doesn't necessarily have to be every single day, but at least once a week that you have some time, you ask open-ended questions, and you also listen generously with acceptance for what the answer is, not being critical or there needing to be a right or wrong, but just like what is happening inside you. That contributes to the experience of growth and the strong relationship. Although I feel compelled, I'm imagining there's somebody listening who's like, yeah, but I don't want to talk that much. I'm an introvert. And that actually sounds miserable to talk all the time about everything. And I want to say, if you both enjoy talking a lot, or one of you enjoys talking a lot and the other one enjoys listening, there doesn't need to be equality of sharing. That's completely fine. And if you're an introvert, it's also fine. It's not actually about the quantity or how much you're sharing or how many topics you cover. It's that when you share, you're revealing who you are. And that can happen with a relatively small or short exchange, as long as you're keeping it real and actually revealing what you've been thinking about.
That's probably one of your keys to success for power couples. But what are some of the reasons that you would say that help couples stay together? And that's one. I like that. I didn't realize I was doing that. And then what are some of the things that you see that tear couples apart after they've been married for, 15, 20, 25 years?
I think they're all variations on the theme of growing apart. I have 6 keys to an intimate marriage that when someone does these 6 things, it keeps people together. And then really when any of them are dropped, it naturally leads to growing apart. So cultivate curiosity is the first one. It's also the easiest to implement. So there's no reason to delay. So cultivate curiosity, embrace honesty. I'll say something about each one afterwards. So cultivate curiosity, embrace honesty, be kind.
Today's episode is sponsored by AG1, made by Athletic Greens. AG1 has become a morning routine for me and my husband. One delicious scoop of AG1, and we are absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, and probiotics. This helps us get our day started off right. With AG1's special blend of ingredients, you will support your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and even aging, all of the things. It doesn't taste healthy, which is what we love about it. We can take it with us when we travel. No more handfuls of vitamins that really make my stomach hurt. AG1 is truly giving us the absorption and support that we need with mental clarity and alertness. And it costs less than $3 a day. With a ton of people taking some kind of multivitamin, it's important to choose one with high quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb. And right now, it's time to reclaim your health and your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/real girl talk. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/real girl talk to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
Choose happiness, take responsibility, and seek growth. Cultivate curiosity, we've talked about. Embrace honesty, we've also spoken about, but not as explicitly as I'm about to. Obviously, dishonesty in a marriage is no good when there's infidelity or financial non-disclosure. Like, I'm not actually even talking about that. That's obvious that that is not conducive to a marriage lasting. Not impossible, but doesn't contribute to it lasting. With embrace honesty, I'm talking more about, like, let's say your spouse says, "Hey, honey, how are you?" And you say, "Fine," when really you're not fine. You're seething that he didn't empty the dishwasher last night when you expected, or even if it has nothing to do with him, work was really hard and, you're about to cry and you just want to have a glass of wine and talk about something else. It's fine to have a glass of wine and talk about something else, but it's a totally different thing in terms of nurturing the marriage and the relationship, embracing honesty to say, "You know what? I had a really challenging day, but I'd rather not talk about it." That's a totally different thing. It is so much more respectful and honest than to say, "I'm fine," because that's basically training your spouse not to notice what's real in you. It's a missed opportunity for sharing more vulnerably. So that's embrace honesty. In terms of be kind, I'm a physician. I've done all kinds of different trainings related to communication, relationships, sensuality. I've coached hundreds of clients, but I have to say that one of my greatest resources is my own marriage, where it was astonishing for me to learn what I'm about to say and then see that happen with other couples again and again. And that is that as long as I am being kind, I can say anything. Things that I never thought I could say to my husband because he'd be offended, he'd contract or get angry. I've said things that were really not even that big a deal, and he's responded that way. But it matters so much how I say something. And if I express dissatisfaction or an edgy desire or anything complicated, or I just need help with something, if I express it with kindness, without blame, criticism, pointing to inadequacy, it is amazing how he responds. And so I challenge anyone, if you're listening and you think, "Yeah, I can't say that to my guy," look at how you can say it clear of resentment, no assignment of blame, just a pristine desire with kindness, and I think you'll be surprised. So that's cultivate curiosity, embrace honesty, be kind. Those are the first 3 to really master and embody. They're not the kind of thing that you master and then check off your to-do list. They are daily practices.
Right.
But those are the things to focus on first. And once a woman has, or a couple, either one or both, have facility with that and confidence with that, I like to talk about choose happiness, where no matter what's happening, you have the inner power to pivot and choose happiness. I just emphasize that it comes after the other things, because if you start with choose happiness, it may well look a little bit too much like compromise and settling. But if you have the capacity to bring anything up, then it's really awesome to be clear, actually, I'd rather just have a lovely evening. I'll handle that myself, or whatever the case may be. So choose happiness, take responsibility. This one is fun to talk about, maybe the most challenging to implement. Very often we think about relationships being 50-50, and I'll meet you halfway, and it takes two to tango. And it certainly does take two to tango. If both people are oriented to taking 50% responsibility for the quality of the relationship, you can be sure that the most important, impactful, challenging aspects will be dropped. Both people will be covered. There'll be some overlap in the 50% covered by both of them. So I really talk about each person taking 100% responsibility for the quality of the marriage. And I guess I'll just add with that I have seen some challenging relationships completely transform and improve when I have coached just one person. And this has happened both with men and much more often with women. But either way, when one person really takes responsibility and changes, the whole relationship improves in very significant ways. And then often that other person suddenly becomes available to do some of the work themselves as well. And then the sixth key to an intimate marriage is seek growth. As I've said, I've enjoyed so much how you have brought in growth and how people continue to grow. And the fact is that is clearly a lived reality for you. But for many, our bodies continue to grow in age. We don't have the capacity to stop that. And often, but not always, when it comes to career and purpose in that realm, we continue to grow. But certainly when it comes to spirituality and marriage, people can stall out and stagnate if you don't actually seek growth within your relationship. Just listening to this podcast and picking one or two things to implement, that's an example of what I mean by seek growth. But if you don't actively look for how to grow within the context of your marriage, often the growth will come find you and bite you in the rear in the form of needing to grow because things have gone south, or you end up with a stagnant, unsatisfying marriage.
Right.
If you're not going to seek growth, that's probably the best option. But seek growth means dating one another, even if you've been married for 30 years. It means choosing to read a book together, or just you read a book and then implement it in your marriage. It means asking another couple you admire what the key to their success is. And obviously, this is not an exhaustive list. It just means being creative and looking for ways to grow individually and together.
How important do you think couple friends are to a couple? Because, you'll see a lot, like women will have friends and they don't really know the husband that well, or maybe that husband's never met your husband. And so you're off doing your thing with your friend, and then maybe your husband's off hunting and the fishing or golf, whatever, with their friends, but you never come together as couples. How important is it that couples surround themselves with other couples as a friend group?
I'm grinning here because I've probably been on, 225 podcasts, and I've never been asked that question. So I thoroughly enjoy it. I think it's a really brilliant question, and I don't have a general answer. I think we are easily boxed in when we have too many rules for our marriage. Some structure, shared vision, shared values, that's really important. There's so many different kinds of people married to so many different kinds of people. So if you have the feeling like you don't really know what you're doing, like let's say two people get married and they both grew up in family contexts which didn't inspire them. And so they weren't raised by parents who had a marriage that they could learn from. Not that they necessarily want to do everything the same, but there's a kind of a steadiness and a feeling. Movies, books, like we absolutely lack role models when it comes to marriage. If you're just feeling like you wonder how to navigate things, having some friends who are couples is beautiful, and it will feed you in ways that are both conscious and unconscious. You're a couple where you're both working so many hours, you're devoted to whatever your career is, you have children that you're spending time with, and you want to have time with one another, then I don't know that I would put spending time with other couples at the top of the list over any of the things that I've just named. I definitely think it's more important to have some time. This is for a woman, to have some time alone or just with girlfriends than with other couple friends when time is scarce.
I see that sometimes. And, you just wonder, because not necessarily having particular couples around other couples is always healthy either, because if you have an unhealthy married couple surrounding with a healthy married couple, then they may end up being a sounding board. If you're listening and you find that you're a sounding board or your own therapist to some of your friends, as couples, that's probably not the healthiest. You may refer them to the pastor or something. That's probably not the healthiest relationships. And I have found too that some couples, you'll have the woman is, really good friends with one, but that the husband doesn't like her husband. So then you don't spend time together as a couple. And you certainly don't want to force that, because then you're going to have an issue with your husband. And I certainly wouldn't want to be forced to be around someone that I didn't want to spend an evening with. I could be spending it with my kids. So I'm glad that you answered that. I appreciate it. And I'm telling you, I have a list. So I think we could probably go on forever if we had forever. You need to come back on the show.
Okay.
And that's what we need to do. We need to make time where you come back and we'll talk more, because there's a lot of things that I wanted to ask you, just the high performers keys to a successful relationships. And we talked about some of those keys to relationships, but then other things you touched on a little bit on key number 2 about the, I think it was 2. Yeah. Embrace honesty, and what happens in a marriage when honesty is not embraced. And you do find yourself with a partner that has strayed, but you don't want to leave that marriage. There's women today that struggle with that. So I'd like for you to come back and talk about that advice, the women that decide to stay versus the women that decide to go. And it could work the other way, that it may have been the woman and she doesn't want to leave her husband now.
Actually, as the income gap is closed and more women are earning more money, the affair gap is closing too. So
really?
Yeah. So when by and large, men were the either only breadwinner or main breadwinner, men strayed far, far more often proportionally. But as women are earning more money and have more individual power and have less dependency, yes, the rate of straying has the gap is proportionally closing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that would be a really interesting conversation. And I will just say right off the bat that I also do not have a general answer. Oh, you should definitely stay,
right,
or you should definitely go. And I don't even have that with respect to a certain situation. We can really get into it, but my preview teaser for that conversation is that I think the most important thing is to go upstream to what was happening before the affair began. Because when an affair happens, it's not an isolated event. It's an expression of what was going on before that. So that's what needs to be transformed for the relationship to be the kind where the couple looks back and says, that was awful, but I am so glad it happened because look where we are now. The way to get to that is by going upstream and looking what was happening in each of them and between them such that the affair occurred.
Yeah, because if you don't actually solve the issue at hand, then the issue stays. Yeah.
And this is a place where compromise really becomes toxic.
Yeah, I can see that. Dr. Stockwell, you've just been wonderful today.
It's such a pleasure to speak with you. Really.
You too. I'm definitely going to have you back, because we could go, let's face it. Marriage, it's a big topic, right? There's a lot of things that we can talk about with this. And I'm glad that you clarified the compromise, because I think that a lot of women think they need to compromise to keep the peace. And in fact, they're just building resentment within themselves. And so I think it's important that we're honest and have those open-ended questions and conversations. So I'm glad that you brought that to everyone's attention, because I'm taking just whole bunches of notes right here.
Well, I feel like this conversation, it's perfect for a podcast called Real Girl Talk. This
exactly
is real girl talk, some real woman talk for sure.
That's right. Because we're just talking it up. Well, I want you, before you go, tell everybody, because you are a best-selling author, to the book Uncompromising Intimacy and where we can find that book.
Yes, absolutely. Well, what I'm going to recommend is that you go to theintimatemarriagepodcast.com, which will take you to my website, my podcast, Intimate Marriage Podcast, as well as an opportunity to download the first chapter for free of Uncompromising Intimacy. So again, just go to theintimatemarriagepodcast.com and you'll find it all right there.
Excellent. And where can we find you on social media?
I'm on Facebook and in Instagram. You can find me easily. Instagram, it's alexandra.stockwell.intimacy. And I'd love to invite everyone to join my Facebook group. It's called The Intimate Marriage. Basically, we're having conversations like the one we've had today.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I really, really do. And I'm definitely going to have you back on because we have to continue this conversation.
Okay, well, I'll be looking forward to it.
Thank you for tuning in all the way through Real Girl Talk Show. Make sure you subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you happen to have iTunes, would you do me a favor and leave me a review on the show? I know you're going to leave me a 5-star, right? That's the way that I can reach more and more people around the world. Remember, whatever you wish to receive, you have to first give. And I know that you're the kind of person that wants to reach people all over the world and inspire them. You can copy this link and share it with your family and friends. Share it on social media. Remember, people need to be uplifted and inspired more than ever today. Thank you so much for being a part of Real Girl Talk community. And until next time, go after your dreams, create your vision, and truly be the person God intended you to be. Healthy, happy, whole, and full of life. Love you.